Hey, welcome to the Spiritual Speakeasy, where the bar is always open and the spirits are always served. Tonight's guest is very special to me. I had the wonderful, amazing, heartfelt moment of meeting him at an enchanted metaphysical show, and we bonded, and I got a lot of great stuff at his booth. He owns Exquisite Dark Curio. It's a small Native American owned business in Northwest Arkansas, and he has antiques and oddities and all kinds of cool stuff. And he focuses on education and preservation as well as sustainability, and has bonded with his things as well. So that makes it even cooler to talk about. And so with that, I'm going to bring him to the stage. Hi, Schade. How are you?
Hello, I'm well. How are you doing today, Julie?
Great. Hi, Carol. Hi, Greg. Hi, everyone on already. This is going to be an exciting show. Tell us more about yourself. You heard my intro, but what do you want people to really know about you? Because that's just the bio.
Certainly. So, something that I really would like everyone here to know is that my name is Schade Nelson. I'm a Native American. I have a Native American owned business. I specialize in antiques, oddities, things that history has forgotten with a focus on the odd and the macabre. These items are such as mourning hair art, jewelry, religious antiquities, medical antiquities, quack medicine, really anything that encompasses the odd and the dark side of antiques.
That's
I'm
very cool.
located, uh, I'm
No, that's
in
okay.
Northwest Arkansas. So I reside in Fayetteville, born and raised, and I've started to branch out to travel to different events, vendor events, and I will be vending quite a few around the country this year.
Yes. And if you send me those links, we'll be sure to get those on YouTube and the various sites so that people can look you up and even come and see you at the events. We both are sharing
Certainly.
Enchanted in March 28th through the 30th. So we will both be there. So if you want to come by and see Schade and see me, that's where we'll be. He's got a lot of other stuff too. How did you get involved in oddities and macabre?
So it really, oddities and antiques have been in my life pretty much my entire life. My grandmother was an auctioneer clerk at a little place called Callaway Auctions in Springdale, Arkansas, where she clerked auctions for many years. I grew up running in and around antique auctions and old timers telling me stories, digging through old boxes, flattening out and recovering old newspapers that were wrapped around Chinaware, and then finding old apothecary and medicine bottles that would be, tossed to the side or buried out in the back dirt. That's really where my love of all of this started, is digging
That's
through
very cool.
stuff and asking questions.
And you have quite the extensive circus collection too.
Correct. So circus is something that is a smaller aspect of my business, with a focus in sideshow and ephemera. So antique tickets and circus routes and posters. I've always loved the circus and kind of the darker history of the circus. There's a lot of reasons why it's not around today, but there is, I feel like, a lot to be gained from knowing about that history of the sideshows, of the animal circus, of the small mom and pops that would travel by carriage or train. It's always been very fascinating to me.
You have a bond. One of the things that I really liked about your booth was you not only know everything that you have and you've done extensive research on every one of your products, but you also have a bond and an energy that goes along with that.
Absolutely. People always tend to ask me, how do you come up with all of these items? A lot of it is a network of people I've built over the years. But how it started and how it continues is I feel like these items sort of find me. I give them space in my collection. I research these items and kind of bring them to the light of day again to the general public or for my personal collection. I feel like items, especially those with a darker history or related to death, do have a lot of energy attached to them. So I've always said, amongst my circles and friends, these items tend to find me. I'll go searching, and a certain box at the bottom of a storage will call to me, and there'll be something odd in it. And that's kind of been the situation my whole life.
I feel like, especially with that, like it's almost like you're giving the spirits a voice.
Certainly.
You know, they want their story told. They want that energy shared. These are not, your products don't have anything negative, or not going to be dark because some of the history is dark, but they don't have that overwhelming, I have this attachment that needs to be removed from that. They have a different feel to it.
Certainly.
And there's a love that goes with it.
I think that there has been a few items that I've been iffy about. And, once I hold them in my hand, it's kind of a gut feeling. Like, is this have some sort of attachment to it? Is it positive or is it negative? I've had a few items that were, kind of skirting towards a little bit darker. And even those items, I make sure that they go to specific collectors that are going to respect those items and keep them up on the shelf and keep them clean and not have them thrown in the bottom of a box.
That's awesome. That's awesome, because there are those of us that are looking for the darker objects that do respect them and don't intend to clean them or take that away from them, but want to give them a home. And that's
Certainly.
important. Greg and Carol say hi. Hi, Russell. Hi, Carol. Hi, Brian. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining the network tonight. I think it's really neat that you have that draw, and I think they do find you because you are a voice. Now I'm going to ask a question. How much of that do you think comes from your being Native American and having that different view of spirituality and energy?
I feel like there's a number of people that are a little bit more in tune to receiving that sort of energy or noticing it. For a long time, I didn't really know how to put it into words, and my father helped me a lot growing up. You don't necessarily have to. It's something that I may not be able to explain to someone else, but it's something that I'll be able to feel. And he kind of helped me understand that wasn't the norm, but it was okay. And I feel like a lot of reading the energies of an item and its story and where it comes from is definitely something that I connect to more because I'm Native American. We, and my tribe specifically, hold a lot of value in our pottery and our craft and our artwork. All of these things tell a story. And that's why I focus on older items, is often someone put a lot of time and a lot of effort into these things. A lot of emotion is put into these items, whether it be a mourning hair art wreath that was created for someone in memory, or it's a design of a surgical tool that someone put a lot of care and effort into, so it sits correctly in the hand so they can do good work in their practice. I feel like all of those things hold a lot of value. And there's a lot of work and effort put into these items that we don't really see anymore. In our world of mass consumerism, it's cut and dry and manufactured and out the door, through partly necessity, but a lot of losing that creativity of the craftsmanship of an item.
Well, when the things are made by hand, they're giving the people that make them and create them for whatever purpose are putting themselves into that. Like you said,
Absolutely.
They're putting their love, their energy, their being, their essence is going into each one of those products, which actually has a different vibration to me and a sense of feeling. So when you hold that object, you're touching a piece of that person that created that, as opposed
Absolutely.
to a factory driven machine made item, which has, if it has any emotion attached to it, it's not going to be a happy, healthy one by any means, because most of the factory workers, a lot of them anyway, are underpaid and the forced labor situation.
Absolutely. And whereas a lot of the go ahead. lot
Oh, go
of
ahead.
the antique items that I come in contact with, someone had their hands on it. They put a lot of care into it. They put a lot of time into it. And that sort of craftsmanship still exists today, but it's not something we see in our everyday items as much.
How does it feel when it's been packed away for a long time? Does it feel lonely? Does it have an empty feeling, and then you feel it come back to life once you've got it out, and it's like, hey, I'm out, I'm being looked at, I'm being touched, I'm being felt and loved.
I it's hard to explain. For me, it's always been sort of a almost like a hum or vibration. It's kind of it's subtle. It's something that is subtle. I've had items where that kind of feeling went away once I researched it, figured out what it was, and had it up on the shelf and respected it or found it a place in a collection. That energy felt to kind of dissipate. Like maybe it needed to be seen and loved again, and that was it time to dissipate after that time. But I don't know. It's hard to explain. I get such a quantity of items at such a rapid rate all of the time that it's become a kind of an over encompassing rule to respect the item, give it its proper place, take care of it, repair it if it needs it, and then pass it along. I'm a curator of these things. They're not mine. Um,
Hmm.
so like you said, these things like to be seen.
They like to be touched too and held. And
Certainly.
I have found that out from my own pieces that I have purchased from you. It's funny because I'll walk by. I had because of my knee replacement, I had my leech pot and my scarificator sitting on my kitchen table, and it remained there for like 4 weeks. And I moved it back to my shelf, my big glassed in case that I put all my stuff in. And I've gone back 2 or 3 times and picked it up and moved it around, and it's so funny because it's like, I don't pick up my objects and carry them
Yeah.
around. Why am I picking up the leech pot? Hi, Layla. Why am I picking that up? And I will show what we're talking about. It. This is a leech pot. It's just like what it says. It held leeches. Do you have the time date on that, Shade?
That was likely probably mid 1800s
So that actually
to early.
held medical leeches. So people would bloodlet. They believed that bloodletting, you would cut a person. Shade's going to help me learn how to open this, but this is a camera. This is a scarification or scarator. So this is the lever, and you pull it, and I don't have enough hand strength. And that's kind of like I hate to say it, but it's like a Hellraiser box. These little scalpels
Certainly.
that have scoops on them all come out, and you don't want to like have your hand on that when you hit the lever, because there's like
It
where
all
all those holes,
slices at the same time.
yeah, all those little things. I'm trying to get it for the camera. All those little holes have scalpels. They're like scalpel sharp objects that have scoops on them, and they all pop out. And they cut the person, and then they take the leeches, and then they put the leeches on you to bleed out. That's a
And
leech.
that's a mummified leech that I have, and actually another leech pot that I have in my possession. They would cut you, they would bleed you, bleed out all your toxins, bleed out all your demons,
The
and
body humors.
leech
You
from
were
this.
going
Yeah,
to adjust
certainly.
the body humors, the different fluids of the body, depending on whether it was sickness, infection, depression, whatever. They were going for a different type of body fluid, and controlled or not. Which anytime you're using a scalpel, that many little scalpels that are sharp. I mean, obviously, if you hit a vein, if you hit an artery, you were kind of screwed.
You're in
So
bad shape.
you were in bad shape. There was, and the leeches then, they would take medical leeches and they would keep them in the little pot, and they'd pull them out. They stick them on the thing, and it would enhance. They would bloodlet. The leeches would soak up, drink the blood. When they got full, they'd change them out with the leeches that hadn't eaten yet. And yeah,
So that certainly
I love
may
my
be a
little
reason
scarificator.
why your leech pot and your scarificator is like you're drawn to pick them up. You're drawn to check them out. They did contain most likely quite a few different people's blood at some point.
Hmm.
So it's
Yeah,
sterile
and I
now,
can
but
feel that energy. There's a lot of energy. There's a lot of story, and there's a lot of sickness. And being a nurse by trade, that is something I'm drawn to, very
and
much
something
so.
you're likely familiar with, and
That's
so
true
it's
too.
interesting that you have that same feeling with these items as you do or would have in your trade.
Uh-huh. Well, and I went right to that at your booth too. That was funny. Like I found that there was I picked up a lot of things and I was like, ooh, ooh, ooh. But then there was a couple, oh no, this is mine.
Yeah,
I want this.
this isn't for me.
This is what I have to have. What we're showing and telling, this is something else that I picked out. This is let me get it right, 1860s communion set. And it's
Correct.
whew, this camera is killing me. There we go. Go that. Hang on. Go this way. There we
Yeah,
go.
I see it.
And it
That would
has
typically have the wine and the wafers for communion.
this would be the little wine bottle or the holy water, depending on. I mean, sometimes the priest would wash their hands first. It has the little communion drink that you would pour into to drink, and then the wafer pot. There is a politically correct word for that. I am not Catholic. I am Episcopal. I should know what the wafer pot is called, but the communion wafer pot, and it actually has like
Which
little
has a piece of
wafer
wafer.
pieces still in it that I did not put in there. And so there's the little communion tray that you would administer the wafer on, and the little pot that it would stay in. And again, I hold that all the time too, which is really weird. Have you all ever heard of a sick box? I have not.
Certainly. So a sick box or a last rites kit would be very similar to the communion kit. It would have a crucifix. Often it would have two candles to light as well, along with a holy water bottle. And that's usually for last rites. It would have a prayer with it. A priest would come and perform the last rites for someone on their deathbed. Often this would be contained within a crucifix and hung on the wall. There's also like a black cased version of that that's usually a little more ornate, that's less in home and more that the priest would travel with. That'd be a little bit fancier, more of your silver goblet and candelabra style, where it's going to be a little bit nicer, and that's one you would travel with. And then there would be one contained within a crucifix or a cross with Jesus on it on the wall that would stay in the home. But yeah, it's a last rites or a sick call. They do it when someone was sick or had some sort of illness as well.
I need to get one of those from you. Do you
Okay,
have one of
I
those?
will keep. I don't currently, but I should have. I should be able to find one for you quite easily. It's interesting.
See how
I
this
kind of
works? It was
yeah.
it was suggested, and I'm like, yes, I want one.
If I think about it hard enough, it'll show up soon.
That'll be awesome. Lots of comments coming up. I'm trying to do multiple formats here. Nancy says hi. Okay, we answered the question about the sick box. She said that's the best explanation anyone has ever given her. Thank you. She really appreciated that. Nancy, wafer pot. Yes, like the Catholic Church, the communion wafers, Episcopal, I'm sure Methodist. It's like a little pot that the communion. There we go. Communion wafers are in. And then this is the little lid, which is also the tray that they would put on the person to take communion. And then within the box, it sits like this. Greg says he has one that is inside a cross with a false bottom. Ooh,
Very
that
cool.
would
Very
be
cool.
that would be interesting. Ciborium. Did I pronounce that right? Ciborium. That's the name of the wafer. Okay, I'm learning things.
That sounds familiar.
See,
I couldn't think of the name of it.
Yay! People on tonight are great. They're going to have to use their brains. It's a
I
wafer
love
pie.
it.
I do too. What did you bring to show us? You've got some
So
stuff
actually,
right there
I've
behind you.
yeah, I have quite a few things. So I'm actually getting ready for an event coming up in Omaha. It's Oddity and Curiosities Expo, and so I'm going through all of my inventory. So this has worked out perfectly. This here is the stand that it's on is a funeral home flower stand. So it's what typically used to put flowers in and around the casket during a funeral. But today I'm using it to hold this framed piece. This is a hair wreath or a mourning hair wreath. Um, this kind of goes along with the mourning hair jewelry of the Victorian era. Someone would pass away and they would take the hair of the deceased and they would create either memorial jewelry in the form of a locket or a watch fob, which is the little chain that connects to your pocket watch, a brooch, necklace, sometimes rings and bracelets. And then they would also often make a wreath as well out of the hair. They're often, the hair is woven into different flowers, braids, and leaves. And this was done to kind of commemorate and remember the person who had passed away. Sometimes the larger wreaths are called heirloom wreaths or heirloom hair pieces, and those would be made in honor of multiple people in the family. So often they're different colors of hair from different members of the family, and it kind of
Oh,
creates
wow.
a little more unique style of hair wreath and larger as well. But yeah, it's
To me,
artwork
that's
made with hair.
very sad that I mean, I guess families do die out, so to speak, and they, sometimes there's no more children to inherit things, and I guess too sometimes people don't know what they have, and so they let it go, which to me is sad.
There's been many times that I have found some sort of hair jewelry or a hair piece in the family. It's too weird. They don't want it. They don't want it around. They don't want to hang it up. It's kind of taboo. And a lot of the items I deal in have that sort of connotation around them, where it's dark, it's taboo. We're going to put it out of the light and not make it where it's not seen, and that really upsets me. These things are wonderful and beautiful, and I think they deserve respect and to be displayed. And so my goal is to restore these items if I can and get them to homes to people who love them.
Nancy says Julie's family would have colorful jewelry after she goes. They would, wouldn't they? They'd have to. Yes, they would. A lot of museums being preserved, a lot of energy with those wreaths.
Certainly.
It's sad though. I mean, to me, a family member's passed, and I understand that death has a certain macabre connotation and that people don't want a lot of dead relatives things around. I mean, it's one thing to have a chair or have a dining set or dishes from a loved one, but their hair is a very personal item. It's like they are still with you, and
Certainly.
that I'm sure to some families. And there's guilt. Don't you think there's guilt attached to some of that too? Like, if I didn't treat grandma right or I didn't treat my family right, now I've got her hairpiece sitting in my house.
Certainly. Well, and speaking to the age of some of these items, that the idea around death and memento mori, where we all have to die, we all must die. Everything has a due date. It was very romanticized. It was seen as something that was welcomed, and it was very beautiful. So it didn't have the sort of mortal fear associated with it as a lot of us in America today associate with death. Didn't have that connotation, like it didn't have that meaning. It was celebrated. People went through long stages of mourning and grief, but it was created into artwork from the death cards that were sent out to people that had all their info on it, to the tombstones, to
Mm-hmm.
the jewelry, the clothing, everything was so detailed and intricate, and to celebrate that person after they passed. It was sad, but it wasn't fearful.
I'm going to get back to that. Carol says she has the hair and ashes of all of her pets that have transitioned, as well as, I'm going back, hair of her grandmother in a very long braid. I love that. I think that is so super neat. Like, I think that's amazing.
I
Hi,
love that.
Damien. It's morning where Damien is. He's getting up to go to work or whatever it is he does, and he tunes on early in the morning, like 3 or 4 o'clock
Oh,
in the morning.
wow.
Yeah.
Well, good
So
morning.
good morning. So why
I
do you
finally
think?
just figured out how to see the comments.
Oh, sometimes mine pop and sometimes mine don't, and I'm missing some of them, which is why I've got it popping on my phone on, I guess, another viewing system that somebody's on, and so I'm getting most of them on my screen, but every once in a while one of them's popping up here and they're saying hi, so then I have to look down here to say hi. 3:30 Scotland. Ooh,
Oh, all the way from Scotland.
that's
Well,
so
hello.
early. So early. I'm not awake at 3:30 in the morning, hopefully. Why do you think it is that we have in America these days? Because it did, like you said, it didn't used to be this way. Why do we have such a fear of death?
I think that came with the funeral industry, and how in the past, someone would pass away, they would die, you would sit with them. You'd sit with the body. They would be on what's called a cooling table and inside of a wicker containment. You would sit with the body for long periods of time, usually however much time you needed. Um, and now it's very cut and dry. Someone passes, it's say your goodbyes. It's quick to the mortuary. It's quick to the embalming process, and it's very rapid. Whereas I don't feel like people have as much time to sit with someone after they pass, immediately after they pass, before they are embalmed and are prepared for a funeral. Um, I think that making it so cut and dry and quick, um, especially related to the funeral industry, I think that is what has kind of caused that fear. When death comes, it comes very fast, and the process to get you into the ground seems to be very fast as well.
Yeah.
Whereas in the past, it wasn't. People would sit for a long time with someone before they called the funeral home to then prepare their bodies for a funeral. So that's what I personally believe. Um, Everyone's scared, um, with a growing world, and we're constantly surrounded by fears. Um, I
Yeah,
also
for
think
sure.
I also think that the medical industry has changed, where you get a cut on your hand, it's not going to kill you. Where in the past, everything could kill you. Death was around every corner. People didn't live as long, so it was more regular in everyday life that you had multiple children. Many of those children would have passed. Not all of them would have lived from disease or from just general dangers. So I think that as a society, we have progressed to a point where everyone lives much longer, and death isn't around us as much as it
Mhm.
used to be.
I think that's a really big point. I hadn't thought of that. And then we have things that pop up, not to trigger anybody, but things that pop up like COVID, and where there is a death
Mhm.
count, and it's a rapid death count. Rapid, no more rapid than other diseases in the world,
Mhm.
but rapid for what we're used to. Let me rephrase that. Now that I've said that,
Seeing in
it
our
it,
yeah,
it was
seeing it
it,
in our immediate vicinity, like we don't
and
see
it
it
was
as much.
media. The media
Mhm.
coverage was, they were doing death counts every hour, every 15 minutes, which
Mhm.
we've never had with media before. I mean, it
Certainly.
was like you said, it was an everyday occurrence. It was an all the time occurrence in history,
Well, our
but it
jobs were
wasn't.
dangerous.
Yeah.
Our jobs were way more dangerous. Our medical practices were much more dangerous and very early. Our medicines were very early. And that even goes into some of the antique medical items and some of the antique medicines that I deal with. I sell a lot of antique apothecary bottles and that sort of thing. And you get to see the transition where you had a cough or cold, they were prescribing you anything and everything for that cough and cold, including some of the craziest narcotics. And they really understand how those worked yet. So it's like,
Right.
here you have a cough. Here's a take 3 tablespoons of heroin and cocaine for it, and that's what they would give
Right.
you. You had an ailment. Well, you were full of demons. Well, you better start bloodletting to get those demons out of you. And so medical practices changed over time as well. So a lot less people dying. It's not around us as much as it used to be.
No, no, and even and I've got a lot of good comments here, people, and I promise you I'm going to get to them because there's some people are really enjoying this conversation, and I'm grateful. I want to interact with you all, but it's funny. I became a nurse in 1984, and I can remember on this in the surgical hallway we had 2 locked boxes that only the house supervisor is what they were called back then. The house supervisor had a key for, and it was liquid cocaine. And if somebody was hemorrhaging like orally, or they had a tonsillectomy, which by the way, back then, even in 84, people stayed 2 and 3 days, children stayed 2 or 3 days with a tonsillectomy, and they would oftentimes bust a stitch or something would happen and they would bleed, and you would have to go get the liquid cocaine spray and you would spray. We also, we sat by people's beds when they died as nurses, and then we would call the family. We would prep the body. We didn't do a funeral prep, but we would clean up the body and get it dressed, and we would cover it so that it looked like it was in natural sleep the best we could. And we would call the family. The family would come in and got to say their goodbyes. That no longer happens. And I can't tell you, because I worked institutions, I can't tell you when that actually switched, but it switched long before COVID. COVID made it worse. COVID made
Certainly.
we got hours to get that body out before that. But just the change since 84 has been tremendous. It's been tremendous.
Like the time you get less and less time. So I had a comment from Damien shortly ago that said, do you find the items have more energy attached the older they are, or the more the connection with the person is determine this? I think it depends. Some items, I think, with a lot of historical significance may have quite a bit of energy attached to it because people believe it does. Religious items, for example, are like that. If I have an antique item, such as this, for example, which is a antique meerschaum carved Black Madonna figure of the Catholic faith, depicting Our Lady of Hal, which is a saint in Belgium around the 1500s. She stopped a battle. She was said to lift her robes and stop cannonballs from a siege between the Catholics and the Protestants. And people looked at her as a saint and prayed to that saint because she was said to have performed a miracle and saved their town. So that has a lot of historical significance, a lot of religious significance for a lot of people. So I feel like a saint idol or a shrine or a statue can have a lot of energy because it's given that energy. Whereas a memorial or a hair wreath or something like that has a lot because it's from someone in remembrance of someone. Now that can go another direction. I've had items such as war memorabilia, trench knives, that sort of thing, and that's something I won't sell anymore because they have a direct negative connotation with death, something that has taken a life. And that energy is a whole different story. Often
Yes,
those are the items that don't want to be seen, they don't want to be picked up and handled, and you forget they're on the shelf. And that's not something I really want around. So I think
there's a shame. They almost hold the shame of that person that in their position was forced to do what they had to do.
Certainly. So I think it has a different emotion attached to it. So it varies. I believe it varies greatly depending on what the item is.
Damien also says or asks the concept age where immortality can be achieved in the next 30 years by uploading subconscious into a quantum CPU. Do you feel less ghosts would be made or souls can't be copied and hauntings continued?
It's interesting. I haven't quite had a question like this before.
I haven't
I believe that
either. He
um,
always comes up with good ones.
yeah, consciousness mapping is something that they are studying and trying to do and perform. I believe with the assistance of AI as well. Um, create it, and it's a kind of a tricky question. That's something that we are not achieved yet. Of been able to map a subconscious and upload it into a computer. Um, it would be very interesting to see that done. Um, I believe that the consciousness that can be captured by a computer, a CPU, may vary from sort of your spirit and your soul. But then again, if we are able to figure that technology out, who's to say they're not the same thing? Um, that sort of collective consciousness and the concept of a soul that many people have through different religions. Um, I wonder if it would copy it, and there'd be two. It'd be quite interesting to come back as a
Ooh.
ghost and see your consciousness copied onto something. Um, but I think it determines if it's a copy or if it's an extraction. And that's something that only time will tell. If we ever discover that technology, I think we'd have to prove the existence of a soul, and we would have to prove the ability to copy a consciousness. And hopefully that's something we see in our lifetime. I think it'd be really interesting when science and spirituality kind of combine. So, no, it's not an exact answer, but
that's scary, though. That's scary.
yeah,
The ability to extract someone's soul.
but very interesting question.
It is
Something
good. That's a
something I've
whole
thought
nother
about before.
podcast. That's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah, that's a whole other podcast for sure.
Woo. Let's see. So Supernatural says they had a death counter. Yes, they did. Some of the TV stations did run a death counter through COVID, which was very scary and intimidating. And the radio stations were ticking away as well, which that's another whole topic too. You're getting into fear mongering. I believe personally with things like that. It certainly did not help people with anxiety. Carol, we'll talk later. She is with me. Let's see. Nancy had the chance to say goodbye to her mom. Wouldn't have missed that. No, I had the same chance. I sat in the room, and that's the comment. That's why I made that comment. When my mom passed, I sat with her. Because I am a nurse, they let me into the COVID area. I was allowed to suit up and go in with her. She was not aware I was there, but I got to sit with her until she passed. And then I got to sit with her afterwards. And the biggest blessing ever. I mean, I'm sure she knew I was there subconsciously. I knew I was there. I don't know how people, I understand that that's hard for some people. I do.
I know in the past, sometimes they would sit for days with the deceased. For days at a time.
But you get your chance to make your peace.
Absolutely.
People don't have that chance today. They don't have the chance to, as memories crop up, go into the weight room and talk to the person that's passed, which they had that luxury before. That is a luxury.
Yeah, it is. And even in modern times, they will tell you, take as much time as you need. But there's still someone sitting somewhere waiting for you to exit that room. And that's something I think that has changed. They're ready for that next step. They're getting you to the next step. Whereas in the past, you'd often be in your home and you'd sit for days. And I don't know if that's something we can really do nowadays, because it's our idea of death has changed, and it's a lot harder, I believe, than it used to be to do that.
I would agree with that. I think emotionally, there's a separation there's been a separation that's made. And I think, I don't know if that's on purpose or not. I would like to entertain that thought with somebody someday, because I really do believe that is part of the industry, to cash out, rush, make fast decisions to make money and get people out of rooms. but that's my personal bias with that.
Yeah,
And
yeah, right.
I have no proof of that. That's just how I feel personally
It
about
it may
it.
not be purposeful, but it still does happen, unfortunately.
Right. Nancy said her dad died at home from cancer when she was alone taking care of him and young. I wish I knew then what I know now. That would have helped. Don't we all, Nancy? No
Yeah,
regret.
no, we
You
are.
were there with him. That's such a special time, and you did the best you could in that moment. You did what you knew. I'll let you take this one.
To say someone sees say someone that sees a knife, sees death, and bad energy, where someone can see the earth burning elements to form atoms to bond and create the elements into forms made of water. That may be one to think on a little bit. Damien's asking some very interesting and deep and heavy questions. Um, Also,
Yes.
Damien, if I can't answer immediate in the podcast, send me a message. I'd love to talk with you more. Um, I think that once an item is changed, whether it's smithed or changed into a new form, I think it can take new energy and new shape. A lot of ancient jewelry making techniques are made that way with intention and energy put into them. So I think, if you take a raw piece of gold or silver and you turn it into something with intention, such as something that'd be used in like spiritual practices or ceremonial practices, forms of magic, forms of witchcraft, and alchemy, I feel like that intention energy can be put into something, and then it can be something else. And then you can also take that same item and try to do harm with it,
Yeah.
and that may change it as well. Or you can take that item and try to do good with it, and that may change it as well. So I believe it has to do with the intention
I think
behind
intention,
the
yeah.
item.
Intention is a huge, what the manifesting goals were at the time it was being made, what prayer was put into it. And with that then carries into the conversation. You have to be so careful what you purchase because the intentions are not always marked on things,
Certainly,
you
and I see
know?
that a lot with
Like,
being Native American, and you see many different vendors who don't have sort of Native American ties selling like white sage and those sort of things, for example. Where was it grown? Where Who harvested it? Was it harvested with the right intention? Was it grown fast and harvested with the intention just to make money on it, or was it sent out into the world to help people and to cleanse? So you really don't know, and I deal with that a lot in my line of work. Sometimes I'll sell like old animal skulls and that sort of thing, and I have to make sure those things are sustainably sourced and they're not. People aren't. I won't work with a poacher and I won't work with certain hunters for various reasons. I want to make sure those things are sustainable. The animal was killed and it fed someone versus the animal was killed to profit off of. So it's kind of it's a hard line to navigate sometimes with some of the odd and old items. You know, do I sell that and can I make money on it? Do I want to? you know, do I?
absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. Do I want to? And I think that goes into energy transfer when I pass an item along to someone else. Sometimes you'll come to my booth and an item will be behind glass and it doesn't have a price on it. I'm waiting for the right person to walk by and ask me about it. I'm waiting because I believe in consensual energy transfer. That I don't want to send something to somewhere to someone who doesn't understand what they're getting into, or maybe that item doesn't belong to just anyone. It needs to speak to someone before it goes home with them.
You run across that a lot with human bones and human remains being sold on
Certainly.
the market. From my spiritual history and the people that I have worked with, being initiated in several different spiritualities, religions. Palo is not one of them, but I worked with people who were initiated and were priests in Palo, and they oftentimes would procure I'm very careful with the wordage here because I never know who's watching me. Will procure skulls and various items of humans by robbing graves.
Hmm.
They don't go to a market and purchase these things. Usually they are obtained someplace, not necessarily in the United States. I will say that. But there are
Certainly.
methods in third world countries to getting body parts that have not been consensually sold or given, nor were they harvested correctly. And though Paulo does a lot of good work, it is a religion in which the left hand works with the right hand. So not everything is done is positive within that religion.
Certainly.
And so, they would go to a shop and purchase something or obtain something on the market. And, there's a lot of oddity shops that will sell things like that without considering the energy that it's going to be used for.
Absolutely.
And that to me is scary and sad.
And that's why I try to work with reputable sellers, reputable shops. I try to work a lot with medical antiquities, and items that it's nearly impossible to source, where skulls came from. Even if it is a medical skull with a brand on it and a log number, it's hard to know. So a lot of it, I believe, is if it was a skull was moved and traded and sold years and years and years and years ago. I can't control where it came from originally and that it was later turned into a medical prep, but I can respect it and get it somewhere where it'll be respected, to be used in an educational sense, or a historical sense, depending on where it's from and what its use was. So that's my outlook on it. Is I try to only work with people that I would trust, and sources that I would trust, such as certain private collectors, certain museums. And then there's other people I won't work with in certain museums and
Sure.
organizations I won't work with because I've really researched them and decided I don't like that practice. So it's a lot of navigating, um, who to work with, who not to work with, where to source from. It's a lot of
A
navigating
lot of
that.
research. A lot of
Certainly.
research.
It's
A
it's
lot of
endless
time and
amounts of
research.
research.
Barbara said her husband passed away 7 years ago in the ER. The doctor told her that she could stay with him as long as she wanted to. Her brother and sister were with her, and they all stayed with him. And then she had her time alone with him. It was probably a good 30 to 40 minutes before we left. I think it was very helpful and very natural. I'm so grateful for that, Barbara. That's
It's
very
good.
heartfelt and so important for you and your family to have that healing time. That is so needed. And when when you meet Shade and you get to handle his items and you see his items and you see what's been left behind by people, the fact that those family members might have gotten to stay with that person to me means the world to me, because these people went through some trauma. Their medical system was not at all like our medical system. And it's so nice when you can spend that quality time with someone before they pass, and that's a bond that you will have with your husband that no one else can have, and you will carry on to the next, I feel, the next dimension, the next whatever experience we have.
I think it's important. My grandmother, all growing up, was very sick, and I witnessed her slowly dying for many years. And I was able to sit with her for long periods of time in the hospital after, and also at the funeral. And my pursuit of studying these sort of items and studying death and cultural death practices from around the world, um, that I believe a lot has to do with growing up with my grandmother. She died 6 or 7 times on the table and then lived 12 years after that. So it was something that I was
Oh
around
my
a lot.
gosh.
And to this day, I still feel her presence quite often, looking
Hmm.
over me. It's kind of changed my perception on spirituality, on death, um, how to welcome it, how to live with it, and how to grieve properly. Used to be really scared of death, and I'm not. And I feel like a lot of that I attribute to my research, my items, and working with other collectors with that sort of darker side of antiquities. It's helped me a lot with my own mortality and my view of it.
Mm-hmm. And that comes with age too. I mean, you're so much younger than I am, but death and being a nurse, you would think, yeah, you're used to death. No, death. I don't do death. I do spirits after death. I talk to dead people. I don't do death. I learned to do death with COVID, and I still don't do it well, but I do it a lot better now than I did prior to COVID. I have a different understanding of it, but I think I was forced to do that with my own family and myself
Mhm.
because I was ill and had a split second there where I zoned out, and so that made me also see things in a different light. When you have that
Mhm.
your own death experience, that changes a lot of things. Um, Damien
It
says, I
does.
hope to have a ghost hunting team around me when it's my time. If you need to unplug life support to charge equipment, you have the blessing to do so. I am with you, Damien.
That's great.
Come back in various ways. Turn their CD players on, turn their stereos on, turn their TV on at night. That's going to be me. I'm going to be the one.
I
Let's
grew
see.
up. My grandmother had a Victorian home that my father grew up in, and his siblings grew up in. Decrepit as all get out when she first got it. She remodeled it. And some of my earliest memories is wandering around that old Victorian home and experiencing quite odd phenomenon in that home and in that place. And to the point where other people would experience the same things. And then, I talk about it years later, that house has been gone for years, and talk about it with other people in the family. And they're like, I had that same experience, or I
Oh,
saw
that's
the same
awesome.
thing. That's actually what started my love of skeleton keys and antique keys. Is I used to find them constantly in that home, and they end up going to the old doors and that sort of thing. We'd find them in the dirt outside or under the floorboards, and so that's something that stuck with me. I still find keys constantly, and I have my
Oh,
entire
wow.
life. I find old skeleton keys that kind of come to me more than anything else. Um, but it kind of started with that old house and some of the attachments in that house, some of my earliest memories.
Carol says, do you have any items that have to have protection on it? If so, can you talk about that item?
There are a few things that have come into my possession, that they go in a certain curio cabinet that I have for a while. It is a very old antique curio cabinet. It has leaded glass. So it stays in the leaded glass case for quite some time. And most of my
Ooh.
items I'm unsure about stay in the leaded glass case for some time until I can decide whether or not I want to keep them in my space. I have had quite a few items where they end up out in the garage or in the shed, or they end up at one of my antique booths or to a private collector. They don't really stay in my possession for very long. That's only happened a few times. Um, One of those items was a trench knife that was World War One, and it was one of those that didn't want to be touched or seen. Something that I'd
Mm-hmm.
forget was even there, and that was really one of the first times I had experienced that head on, and it kind of changed my perception of or perspective of certain items that come into my possession. I try to do a little more research before I just pick something up or before I purchase something in a collection, amongst other things. For that reason, I try not to have stuff in my possession that has odd energy around it. Um, but that also is a situation where I may feel differently about an item than someone else. I can exist around this stuff much easier than some people can. And so I thrive in it. It doesn't bother me. Whereas other people, it may. I have people come up to the booth and they pick up an
Sure.
item and they're like, absolutely not. And they put it back, they cleanse themselves. Um, that's why I tell people,
It's a
stuff,
thing.
certain things are behind glass for a reason. Um, so it really just depends. Um, But that trench knife is the scariest one I've had. And I have a lot of antique religious items, hair pieces. Everything has some sort of energy to it. But if it's too intense, even for me, then I tend to not have it around.
Well, it's better. I mean, why would you pass that on to someone else unless that's what they're
Exactly.
willing to deal with? Sure, sure.
And
Brandon,
I do know some people that will specifically collect haunted items, stuff that has
mhm.
not only energy but entity attachment. They're stronger willed than I. Um, I'll deal with the vibrations. I don't want something looking at me
And listening and
and listening.
responding. Let's see.
Certainly.
Damien says he wants to go to a haunted museum. Katie says, let's see, if you ever come to Missouri, come to my museum bed and breakfast. We have a 10,000-year-old native Indian artifact on display there.
Cool.
That would be cool to see. Are there any items you don't Is there any items you don't touch or felt that you had to get rid of for any reason? Attachments. I think he just spoke to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you texted that and he went on with that. Greg, I wanted to share an experience I had with a fishing partner who passed after 3 strokes. He had a lot of freckles, but none were visible. I was holding his hand, his IV hand when they unplugged him, and the freckles came back because it was a sign for me that he was okay. Yeah, people do that. People leave signs behind. I often read people they will leave dirt, cigarette smoke, cigar smoke, alcohol smells, flower scents. Um,
My nana, when she passed, the room was full of ladybugs.
ooh,
And I every event I've ever done, every drive I've ever been on to going to do an event or being out of town, if I'm anxious about driving or anxious about setting up, I always find a ladybug on something.
that's her sign, letting you know
Yeah, all
she's
the
with
time.
you.
I find a lot of ladybugs on stuff. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's her just looking out.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Julie says that she was with her mother when she passed. Once I got home and sitting at the kitchen table, I had an overwhelming sense of peace I've never experienced before. I believe it was her letting me know what she was feeling. Absolutely. They come back to us. If they want to, they can do that. I'm a firm believer in that. Which then makes me wonder, have you ever had any owners of the memorabilia and the antiques that you have you ever had any of the owners come back? Have you had experiences with the actual people they belonged to coming back to you?
The only instance of that I have experienced is my father kept the windows and the doors of the Victorian home that he grew up in. Again, the one that belonged to my grandmother, who was an auctioneer, who originally inspired a lot of my collecting, but also had a scary ass haunted house growing up. Um, Often, my dad would have that antique door. It was on the closet for a while. Then it was also just hung up on the wall for a while in our entryway. And there was a few times that it had come up off of its mounts from the wall and fallen right at the heels
Ooh.
my dad. And so that's something that we've kept around that doesn't necessarily feel like it's a very positive energy around it, but it's been around for so long that it's really comforting to my dad. And so he hasn't had anything really bad besides it falling near him happen. And so that's something he's kind of hung on to for a long time. Um, but it'll randomly rattle. Um, those doors, those antique locks, you'd have to pop close with a butter knife. He told me stories about being the only one home alone when he was growing up, and he had to pop the locks closed with a butter knife because antique locks, they get stuck. They didn't have the original keys until we found them in some of the walls, and he would come downstairs and all the locks would be open, and that's something that he experienced all growing up. So
Ooh.
I feel like that sort of same energy is stuck with that door, and he still has it. I have the keys to the door and to all the doors that were from that original home. So I have the keys to it. If he ever decides that he wants to get rid of it, I'll give him the key to it, and he can do as he pleases with it. But I'll leave it up to him. But that's something that was.
You won't take it? You won't take the door?
I might. I don't know how having something like that in my possession will interact with other things that I own. So that's something I have to be mindful about as well. I won't bring something into my space, even if it's really cool, if I think it's going to disrupt the flow of everything else in my space. Even if I'm comfortable with it, the other items and energies in my collection may not be. So
always mindful, and that's that special quality that you have that a lot of other people don't think about, is being aware of the whole energy situation. Carol says, when my brother was transitioning, we were all able to stay at the hospice facility. We were there for 3 days. Hospices are amazing. When they allow things like that, I think that's the way it should be. That's really how everybody should be treated.
Certainly.
Personal opinion there. Any last questions, guys? This has been like, we're going to have to wrap this up, but we could keep this going. We're going to have a part 2 for sure.
Yeah, I would love to.
Lots of great questions. Do you have anything else to show us before we leave?
Yeah, a couple more things. So I'll just kind of do a run through of some of the categories of items that I sell. We talked briefly about the leech pot. That also goes into like other antique medical items. So this is an old like surgical instrument. It's called a trephine. So it's for trepanation of the skull or drilling a hole into the skull. That's one of the oldest practices of surgery known to man. And it also has a lot of spiritual practice as well, of kind of opening the skull cavity, unlocking that sort of energy. So I personally have a collection of trepanation instruments. This one's from the 1700s, made out of brass and horn. But this is something that has been done for a long time. I can talk about trepanation for hours, so maybe that's a good part 2.
That would be a good. And it's funny because you had some of those instruments on your booth. Mm-hmm. I did not like those. That's so funny, because that was the one, like that and the circus stuff, and that's a whole clown thing for me. That's a whole nother thing. Yeah. But those were the instruments I stayed away from completely. Did not want to have anything to do with those. And I still haven't figured that one out, but I've been thinking about it.
Old religious items. I deal in like old chalkware and statues from like nunneries. This one's of Saint Vincent. So old religious items, Catholic items, they have a lot of energy to them, and I believe that's something that it's energy that's put to them, energy that's put into them due to faith and belief. I deal a lot in old medical items. This is an antique poison bottle shaped like a coffin. It actually has the original contents in it, and the little pills that are poison in there are also shaped like coffins.
Ooh.
Little skull and crossbones. So I deal in old antique apothecary glass, old medicines.
Do you know what the pills are in there?
I don't. I believe that it's either atropine or quinine sulfate, so some sort of poison that would be soluble. I bet it was quinine. Probably. And then it would be soluble, so they take that, and it would be diluted and then turned into medicine for vomiting, laxative, many different things that they would use. Purging, correct.
It's a purging device, yes.
So more antique medicines. One has some Native American imagery on it. That goes into some of my colonialism history that I get into, where ancient remedies would be taken and changed and modified and then marketed. Early 1800s, people would come and steal the medicine, or the medicine that was shared with colonists would be then taken. They would manufacture it and turn it into quack medicine, and then try to distribute it on a larger scale. Again, that intention changes how it heals or not. So stuff like that. And then I have a fascination with like old medical and dental models. Ooh. This is an old teaching model from the early 1900s.
That's very cool.
It's called a medical typodont for the dentistry. But yeah, that's some of the other items that I deal in. Circus as well. These are like old sideshow cards. It's
Creepy,
Tom Thumb, the old
creepy.
sideshow stuff. And then like old ephemera, so like antique postcards, stuff that has death imagery, early 1900s, late 1800s style stuff. I really like the old paper. So yeah, that's some of the other items that I deal in.
Prescription pads. He has prescriptions for all of the old, like going back to, I think I have one for opium. I have one for alcohol. I'm trying to think of what else. Like the doctors did prescribe, and it wasn't in shots. It was like cupfuls of alcohol.
Yeah, they would have dosage cups, and they're like little shot glasses with measurements. And they'd often have advertisements on them as well. And you would end up with like you'd have a cough or a cold, and it's like 1 to 2 teaspoons of this elixir of opium. It'd always be some sort of elixir or tonic, which would be an alcohol or like a pine tar base.
Yes.
With some sort of narcotic in it, and that was supposed to cure you of your ailments, and then sometimes it did, but the dosages were all over the place. They didn't know how to properly measure it, so it was used safely.
No, it was all just whatever that doctor was doing themselves.
They were just winging it.
For real. That sounds really stupid. Yeah, I mean, I had This is how new real psychiatric medicine is. Again, graduated in '84, went straight to a psychiatric facility, and we had. I'm not going to get in trouble for saying this, but we had old psychiatrists that worked in the state system that were way past ready to retire, and they would say, if you haven't tasted and tried all of the medicines that you're giving your patients, you are a bad nurse. And he would order something, and he would come down with the bottle, and he would be like dosing people, liquid lithium. I had quite a few learning experiences on that psych ward. It's like, here, you're going to give this to your patient. You need to swallow one. I'm on duty for 16 hours. You really want me to take? Yeah, you're going to take this and see how you function. Ooh, like, and I'm not going to say I turned it down or I didn't turn it down.
And honestly, that's not early on when you didn't know dosages or how it would affect someone. That wasn't a terrible way to figure out if it was going to hurt them or not. No. The doctors who were willing to try the prescriptions and stuff they were giving people early days, and it's probably why they were able to, come up with doses and proper medicine today.
Sure. Well, in your trial studies for many, many drugs that are out there, including chemotherapy, still do that. I mean, they still actively, let's hit you with the dose, and if it's too much and you have symptoms, then we need to back you down. And so that is a trial and error way. Thank you so much. If you guys want to come out and see Schade, your next gig, you said, is in Omaha, Nebraska at the Oddities.
Correct. Yeah, Oddities and Curiosities Expo is going to be in Omaha. I believe it is at the Health Center. They have a big expo center there called the Health Center in Omaha. And it's going to be on the 25th and 26th of January. I'll have a 2-day event out there. And then I do have some more coming up throughout the year. I think the next one, let me check real quick, is going to be... Facebook is hard to navigate. Let's see. I'm going to be in February 22nd. I'm going to be in Dallas. And then March 15th through March 16th, I'm going to be in Houston. So those are my next big shows. And always keep an eye out. I do local pop-ups, and I have a full online website as well. I will ship anywhere in the United States. That is Exquisite Dark Curio. That's my social medias, my website. You can find me under that name. That's the best way to keep in touch and see where I'm going to be next.
And that is on the YouTube link, as well as the link to the podcast, if anybody's interested in that. Or you can DM myself, or you can DM Schade on his Exquisite Dark Curio, his Facebook account, and ask any questions that you want to ask. Both of us will be doing our thing in March, on March 28th through the 30th at Enchanted Metaphysical and Mystics in Conway, Arkansas. That in itself is a great gig. So if you want a vacation in Arkansas, it's a beautiful place to come down to, and a lot of fun. It's a very open show. It's very cool. I will be doing an exclusive. I believe I'm going to screw this up because I don't have it in front of me. I want to say it's February 21st at Triple Flame. It's a little wellness place, witchy wellness massage area, and I will be doing bone readings and working with people all day exclusively. So there's that show coming up again, and if anybody wants to get a hold of us, please do. And thank you guys so much for tuning in.
Thank you all for all the awesome questions and the interest.
Great questions.
It's been a great time. Thank you so much for having me, Julie, and thank you everyone at the Spiritual Speakeasy podcast and the network. Thank you. I appreciate you guys.
Thank you guys. We were going to